Today on the program Ukraine Today. For the first time, Ukraine has begun using AI-powered drones on the battlefield, something Putin is truly terrified of. The Russian dictator has stated that he will only meet with Zelensky in Moscow. How did the president of Ukraine respond? Belarus has begun joint military exercises with Russia, and Europe is watching in anticipation. Zelensky visited an American factory that was bombed by Russian missiles. This happened for the first time in 32 years. Russian eggs in the USA? I've gathered for you the most important and significant news about Russia's war against Ukraine from the past week. My name is Yulia Kort. Good evening. Since the beginning of September 2025, Russia has used nearly 1,500 attack drones, about 900 guided aerial bombs, and up to 50 missiles of various types against Ukraine. In addition, Russia has ramped up production of Shahed-type kamikaze drones to 2,700 units per month. The situation at the front remains tense. Ukrainian forces struck radar systems in Russia's Rostov region. They successfully counterattacked near the city of Sumy and advanced in several directions. In the south, the situation is stable, but Russian forces are increasing their activity in the Zaporizhzhia direction, using more heavy equipment for attacks. The Ukrainian armed forces have liberated Urozhain in the Donetsk region. The Ukrainian flag was raised over the settlement after it was completely cleared of Russian occupiers. For the first time, Ukraine has begun using artificial intelligence-powered drones on the battlefield. Meanwhile, the Russian forces have effectively learned to precisely control their Shahed drones online and accurately attack various moving targets with considerable precision. More on the drone war in the following report.
Military experts say that operations involving both large and small groups of drones represent a new stage in the war.
If it is possible for Ukrainian manufacturers and so-called noisy attacks to occur, that is, when a single drone is flying, it's clear, you can shoot down some of them, but you can't shoot down 100 drones flying at the same time. In this case, of course, there will be major equipment on the power grid, major equipment on the transportation system, and equipment essential for normal life will be affected. We saw this earlier this year with air transport, and now we're seeing it with the railways. This drone war has put Russia on edge within a week.
Warfare. Together with a Ukrainian company that developed unique software, they are keeping secret what to expect from this new field. It turns out that drones, like living organisms, analyze what is happening in real time and make the necessary decisions.
Drones can decide where to hide and adapt to the situation. For example, if one of them runs out of battery. Ukrainian forces began using this technology about a year ago for training. At first, it was used against Russian groups, areas, and infrastructure.
And it should be noted that they are using it very effectively. In the Kremlin, just hearing the phrase drones in the Kremlin makes their hair stand on end. Even the enemy admits that they simply can't analyze such an important Ukrainian area.
They are truly impressive.
By the way, if something goes wrong during such an autonomous operation, the system immediately transfers control to a human. Unfortunately, Ukrainian technology, the Kolibri 13 FR1, is designed to help with this. This is the so-called relay drone for FPV, featuring autonomous navigation and resistance to electronic warfare. It is the Ukrainian alternative to DJI drones, which are widely used on the front lines.
At the beginning of the Russian invasion, Russia was pulling in Ukrainian territory and Ukrainian regions, while the Ukrainian side had nothing to sponsor operations against Russian-held territories. But now, as they say, here we are. Ukrainian territory, Ukrainian territory, Ukrainian territory. Ukraine endured long raids, but as Putin says, the special military operation is proceeding according to plan, as if this too is part of the plan.
The new Ukrainian system is not just a drone, it's an entire system that includes 2 relays, a control unit, and additional antennas. Moreover, this makes it possible to maintain a stable communication channel at the tactical level. The drone's design is modular, which allows for quick replacement of damaged components right on the battlefield. Among the advantages of the Ukrainian Kolibri are its resistance to strong winds, low temperatures, and the ability to operate both day and night.
When they are taught to interact with each other, when they are taught to guide each other to targets, or let's say, to cover each other, just like we see at various Chinese shows, where drones perform all sorts of beautiful formations in the sky. It will be the same thing only in war. That would of course be an absolute nightmare, and it's completely unclear how anyone could fight against it if drones are taught to think, so to speak, to make their own decisions. Especially if drones are taught to make decisions about engaging targets. That would be a whole new nightmare.
So, how is the Kremlin responding to all of this? Instead of developing new types of air defense systems, Putin is channeling all the efforts of the Russian defense industry into creating more and more methods of terror. In particular, they are actively improving their Shahed drones, training them to strike residential buildings of peaceful Ukrainians with even greater precision. This unpleasant news was recently shared with us by a military radio technology specialist with the call sign Flash. According to him, Russian mopeds have recently become much more dangerous and deadly.
Here's a fresh discovery just now. See those antennas mounted on the wingtips, modems and cameras. Unfortunately, despite the cyberborgs, we won't be able to find them. They will relocate and kill. For those who don't know, this is a new version of the Shahed drone, which can be controlled from Russia, can conduct reconnaissance, and even attack moving targets.
But fortunately, the Ukrainian defense industry began working on Ukrainian air defense long before this. Responding to the enemy, our engineers have already been actively developing our own version of HIMARS. The fundamental and most crucial element, serving as the very heart and foundational structure of the entire Ukrainian system, is a complex and multifaceted entity. This core encompasses the essential principles, institutional frameworks, and underlying values that define and govern the nation's operational mechanisms. It represents the central nervous system, so to speak, from which all other functions and processes within the Ukrainian state emanate and are sustained. Understanding this core is paramount to comprehending the overall functionality, resilience, and strategic direction of Ukraine as a sovereign entity.
Putin stated that reaching an agreement with Kyiv would be impossible and said that a meeting with Zelensky could only take place in Moscow. But he doesn't see any point in it. Putin does not want to end the war or give back the territories his army has seized after destroying cities, families, and people's lives.
I don't see much sense in it. Why? Because it will be practically impossible to reach an agreement with the Ukrainian side on key issues. Even if there is political will, which I doubt, there are significant legal and technical difficulties, which primarily lie in the fundamental fact that any comprehensive agreements regarding specific territories must be formally and unequivocally confirmed. And according to the Constitution of Ukraine, by a referendum. Earlier you asked about our eagle, which is one of our symbols. It looks in one direction and in the other. But take a look at this. At the eagle now. Have we turned away from anyone? No? We haven't turned our back on anyone. It still looks in both directions, just as it always has.
Zelensky invited Putin to Kyiv, stating that he would not go to Moscow as long as his country is being hit daily by Russian missile strikes. The president of Ukraine emphasized that if the Kremlin is not ready to meet on his territory, then let them propose a format that will be acceptable not only to him but also to others. Putin himself recently insisted that he is not turning away from anyone. But now he says that it is impossible to reach an agreement with Kyiv, and that a meeting makes no sense, but it could take place in Moscow.
He can come to Kyiv. If a person genuinely doesn't want to meet during a time of war, of course, it is entirely possible that he might propose something that is completely unacceptable to me or to other concerned parties. I simply cannot go to Moscow when my beloved country is currently being relentlessly bombarded, indeed, being bombarded every single day. In addition,
In Belarus, joint military exercises with Russia have begun and Europe is on edge. After all, anything can be expected from Russia. This time they are planning to practice the use of nuclear weapons. All the details are in the report. And on its territory, Russian groups have already been deployed. Russian groups deployed.
And various others.
Chrism Stofespu, a truly delightful and charming place, offers a warm and inviting atmosphere.
They consistently say that the primary and most significant focus of these extensive military exercises is to diligently practice defending our sovereign territory with the fully integrated joint regional group of forces, ensuring comprehensive security and preparedness. These activities are scheduled.
Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and Tajikistan have joined the Collective Security Treaty Organization exercises. China, North Korea, and India refuse to participate in them.
Statements directed at Belarus, claiming that Belarus or the Russian Federation are threatening someone, actually contradict the actions they themselves are taking.
According to preliminary estimates, about 3,000 servicemen will come from Russia. Belarus will contribute between 7,000 and 10,000. The maneuvers, depending on the government of the Republic of Belarus, will take place at the Lozvida and Lipelsk training grounds.
Russia and Belarus are not just for analysis. We have a defensive capability which we are actively strengthening due to a very complex and difficult situation.
Belarus is prohibiting several separate advances, focusing instead on collective rapid sponsorships and plans, such as Interaction 2025, training on illumination of Hoyson assets, and the Wall Library, while Turkey continues cases involving reconnaissance assets, Cold Search 2025, as well as maneuvering logistics units called Echelon 2025.
Easy Surenesty actually recommends performing various bug maneuvers, which are quite intricate and require careful execution.
For logistics units called Echelon 2025. Defensive.
Since 2020, a decision was made to create a regional grouping. In this way, we strictly follow the decisions of our heads of state and hold these exercises every 2 years.
The rehearsal of the use of nuclear weapons and the Oreshnik missile system has been announced. The Ukrainian Ministry of Foreign Affairs has already responded to the exercises.
We warn Minsk against reckless provocations. We advise them to remain prudent, not approach the borders, and not provoke the defense forces of Ukraine.
In Belarus, they swear that the nuclear weapons themselves will not be used.
You can't use something that, let's say, poses a threat to the whole world, to global security. So how do you plan for that? We'll learn.
Analysts suggest that these exercises may have a hidden goal to create the conditions for amassing Russian troops and equipment on the territory of Belarus.
We are ready for the exercises. We're not hiding anything from anyone. We are truly demonstrating transparency, showing that these exercises are ours.
Such exercises traditionally cause concern among neighboring countries due to the risk of provocations, incidents, or unpredictable actions.
We have reduced the number of troops by almost half, moved their location deeper into our own territory, hundreds of kilometers away from the border, to training grounds.
And at the moment, Russian forces on Belarusian territory consist mainly of vehicles, a limited amount of armored equipment and personnel.
We are conducting these exercises independently by our own decision without regard for the countries to our west. This is to raise the level of training of our servicemen and to improve the coordination between the armed forces of Belarus and Russia. We are doing this for ourselves and essentially to show that we are ready to defend ourselves and do not pose a threat to anyone.
But the active phase of Zapad 2025 is scheduled for September 12-16.
During this period, an increased presence of Russian units is expected, including tanks and armored vehicles.
They don't believe in this. And we don't believe that it's possible to cross the Belarusian-Ukrainian border from here right now. We know what's happening at the border. It's completely reinforced with mines. It's mined. If you try to go there, you'll lose 1,000 people.
Well, of course.
Lukashenko has repeatedly assured that the upcoming exercises pose no threat to either Ukraine, the Baltic states, or Poland.
They keep warning, like, oh, the Suwałki corridor, they'll go to Kaliningrad, cut off the Baltics, seize 3 countries and so on, NATO countries.
However, he said the same thing back in 2022, claiming it was impossible to invade Ukraine from Belarus after Zapad 2021, but a week later he gave his territory to the Kremlin to attack Ukraine.
You accused Russia or Belarus that we would invade, yesterday that we would invade Ukraine. We did not invade. So your intelligence and the billions of dollars you spend are worthless.
In response to the exercises in 2025, Poland will conduct its own strategic exercises called Iron Defender, which will also involve some NATO member countries.
The very fact of the Russian-Belarusian exercises does not pose a threat to Poland. The Ministry of National Defense is taking them seriously. At present, there are no signs that these exercises could escalate into the threat of an armed conflict.
The commander of the Lithuanian army stated that about 40,000 military personnel will be concentrated in the Baltic states and Poland.
After the events of 2022 in Ukraine, these exercises have acquired clearly defined boundaries in terms of perception. They are now being seen not just as exercises, but as something possibly more than mere military maneuvers. There will be disinformation coming from absolutely all sides. 90% will be Russian, and unfortunately 10% will come from other sources. The narrative will be fueled.
The situation on the border with Belarus and the monitoring of Russian military activities remain in the focus of attention for Ukrainian forces.
The president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, visited Western Ukraine. Important leaders met there. Prime Minister of Slovakia, Robert Fico, President of the European Council, Antonio Costa. One of the main topics on the agenda of the meeting between the Slovak Prime Minister and Zelensky was the energy infrastructure. Zelensky visited the city of Mukachevo. He inspected the American plant that was hit by Russian missiles. At the scene, he showed footage of the destroyed building. Let me remind you that on the night of August 24th, the Russian occupation army carried out another combined attack on western Ukraine. Russia struck the city of Mukachevo. As a result of the missile strike, a fire broke out at the plant of the American company Flex. The American company Flex is located 800 kilometers from the front line and manufactures household appliances. This is an entirely civilian production facility. It is a partner of companies such as Google, Lenovo, and Nike. This is yet another case where Russia, under Putin's leadership, targets civilian sites with missiles. What is Putin actually so desperately afraid of? The Kremlin has once again declared its categorical rejection of any foreign military presence on Ukrainian territory as part of possible post-war security guarantees. The representative of the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Maria Zakharova, stated that the deployment of military contingents from foreign states is fundamentally unacceptable, and Moscow firmly rejects any such scenarios. Earlier, Putin's press secretary Dmitry Peskov said that the appearance of European forces in Ukraine would be regarded by Russia as an expansion of NATO's presence. These repeated refusals by the Kremlin regarding Western security guarantees are part of Russia's calls to have veto power over any Western security guarantees for Ukraine, according to a report by the American Institute for the Study of War. At a meeting of the Coalition of the Willing in Paris, it was stated that up to 30,000 foreign soldiers could appear in Ukraine after the end of the war. Among the countries ready to send their troops are the United Kingdom and France, the Baltic states, the Netherlands, and Australia. American experts note that Russia also previously tried to impose strict limits on the number of Ukrainian military personnel in the draft Istanbul Peace Agreement in 2022. Moscow continues to view the draft Istanbul Agreement of 2022 as the basis for any future peace settlement. President Volodymyr Zelensky stated that thousands of Western military personnel could potentially be deployed as part of Ukraine's post-war security guarantees. He said this during a joint press conference with European Council President Antonio Costa. China is involved in the production of Russian weapons. The leadership of the People's Republic of China has blood of Ukrainians on its hands. Beijing supplies Russian drone manufacturers with parts worth tens of millions of dollars. Details and evidence are in the report.
Beijing simply cannot turn its back on Putin. This is the conclusion reached by The Telegraph after analyzing how China is actively supporting the Russians in their war of aggression against Ukraine. In just 1 year, from 2023 to 2024, Chinese companies directly supplied Russian companies with components and materials worth £47 million. Serhiy Flash, a Ukrainian serviceman specializing in military communications, has already published several photos from the front, from Kyiv, showing Ukrainian aircraft shot down by Russia. Sometimes you can see subtitles with the names Chinese companies and manufacturers on the circuits. Sometimes in Russian-Chinese markets, they even joke about it, like in this photo. And recently, in the Herbara drone regulation chambers in Kyiv, where the military even found a video, journalists from The Telegraph, together with Sayare, a risk analysis company, studied global data, especially Chinese exports to Russia. Investigators identified 97 companies from China that supplied components to the Russian industrial sector. Products imported from China were integrated into Northern Aviation, Akhmetron, Putin Electronics, as well as into radio equipment.
In the first 3 months of 2023, Ningbo Peak Depot piloted exports, Santa Equipment, cable exports, and Vanshianki worth £3 million to Russia for the Euro Civil Aviation plant, which is under sanctions for producing combat drones, including the forepost used to track troop movements and strike critical infrastructure. Russian transport helicopters, for example, are equipped with Chinese engines manufactured by Xiamen Limbach Aircraft Engine. Production flights. In the first half of 2024, more than 2,000 drones were shipped out from the assembly line. Previously, Russia exported about 2,500 drones from Harpy in an entire year.
Many of the Chinese drones are sent to the so-called Alabuga. This economic zone is under special supervision. The Russians use low-paid, essentially child labor, and bring in children from Africa who work on the assembly line for UAVs.
In the past 3 years, a Russian company called Alabuga Fibro LS has imported 3,000 tons of kaif and fibro trade from China worth 18.4 million rubles. The Russian firm Morgan LS imports components from China worth almost 4.3 million rubles for drones into the Alabuga Special Economic Zone. It takes the majority of them. Suzo Ekot, a company whose name was seen on a guitar, is associated with the Ukrainian University of Andriy Sybiha. It will be taken to the center Suzo Ekot, where the Ukrainian sanctions will import components worth 1.2 million rubles sterling when he began deliveries to Russia in August 2024.
Investigators are convinced that the figure of £47 million for sterling does not reflect the actual operations between China and Russia because the countries do not always provide accurate and complete information in their reporting. Perhaps this should be considered a minimum. Plus, don't forget about the vast land border between Russia and China, which stretches for more than 4,000 kilometers. Both Russians and Chinese have an excellent opportunity to profit from smuggling goods.
This happened for the first time in 32 years. The US bought chicken eggs from Russia. In July, the US imported fresh chicken eggs from Russia worth $455,000. At the beginning of the year, the country experienced an egg shortage and prices soared due to an outbreak of avian flu. The price of eggs in the US ranged from $3.5 to $6 per dozen. In some stores, eggs were sold with a limit of no more than 2 cartons per customer. Ukraine offered to sell its eggs, but America chose to buy them from Putin. The export of eggs from the Russian Federation to the US is supposedly intended to stabilize prices and balance supply and demand within the country. That's all for today. I'm Yulia Kort. Thank you for being with us. I read your comments and feel your support. Strength to the defenders of Ukraine. Glory to Ukraine. Subscribe, leave a like, and see you next time. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.